Felike, everybody, and thank you for joining me. This is the third and final part of my conversation with author Jane Smith, who wrote the book Three Times Buried. The song John Lovey is performed here by Eddie Ithaca. I hope you enjoy.
Her daughter, she's gone, she can find her no more. She lives to lament her dying hour by the hands of a traitor who still does remain to give an account for the blood of the slain.
We kind of touched on this briefly earlier on, but also in your the author's notes, you talk about how this Helen Chesser accused John Lovey of fathering her child, and the DNA evidence proves that he did in fact do so. What became of the Chesler boy? If you
Well,
know.
sure. He was called John Lovey, and he became a stone cutter or stonemason, and he moved to Aberdeen. He married and he had children. He actually lived at 3 Skene Terrace, just pretty much across the road from your library. That's
All
where he was
right.
living when he died in 1877 from TB, which I believe was a disease that a lot of stonemasons died from. He was only about 54 when he died, but he was my husband's great-great-grandfather.
Okay, that's interesting, and I was very curious about that, and that was another reason why I kind of thought, oh, yeah, I think he might be guilty because he's done this before.
Yes.
He doesn't want
Yeah.
to have another child. So, but anyway.
Yeah.
Um,
That's figured.
I'm glad that you found out a little bit. Someone said that he died relatively young, and of and tuberculosis. But I'm pleased that you were able to find what happened to him. That's kind of that's really neat. And I thought when you're writing this book, I found this interesting that each chapter is kind of a different character's perspective, except for John Lovey, of course. Now, why was that? I think I know the answer, but if you could tell me.
Well, first of all, thank you for noticing that I left him out, because that was deliberate. His thoughts and his motives were a bit of a mystery to me, and I wanted to convey him as enigmatic. And in fact, I mentioned before that they went in the report of the trial. They said that he was rather good looking and mild mannered, and I just had an image of him cool and calm, just with a bit of a mysterious smile on his face. So I wanted to show him as a bit of an enigma, so we couldn't see inside his mind. And I thought that if I showed the course of events through several other people's perspectives, then that would be more of a contrast, because that we couldn't see into his mind, but we could see into others' minds.
Right. Yeah.
And originally I had included some chapters in Maggie's point of view as well. But an editor suggested that I cut them out because it was not balanced with having her point of view at the start of the book and then not later. And it was hard to cut them out because I actually opened with her perspective, and I was really fond of that opening chapter. But I could see her point, and I think it was a good idea to cut out Maggie's perspective. So I had to rewrite a couple of chapters from somebody else's perspective.
Okay. Yeah. I thought that was very, very clever. And exactly. And I asked this to a colleague: "Is why do we not have any by John Lovey?" And she says, "Well, because then you'd know if he did it or not." And you're like, right.
Yeah.
to keep that mystery, you can't have his thoughts and his perspective, because then you would know right away. It was. And I think that was another thing that kept me reading, because you kind of end it with one person, and then you go on with two other people, and then it's like, well, but I want to get back to this first person here, and I have to read 3 or 4 chapters to get back to their point of view to see what's going on, and it helps. It helped move along. That's not quite what I want to say. Not move along the story, but it helped. It helped as a reader. It kept me reading.
That's really good to hear. You know, another practical thing is that I felt like I could possibly sympathize with and relate to the mother, or a few other characters, but to see inside the mind of a 40-something-year-old 19th century male farmer with possibly murderous tendencies, I'd have been a bit too much of a stretch. Maybe I wouldn't have been able to do him as realistically as some of the others.
Right. Okay. And again, we spoke briefly about this as well, and kind of the other questions. But what happened to the rest of the Lovey family, and what became of the farm Futret then?
Well, the farm is still there. It took me a little bit of comparing old maps with new maps and trying to locate where it might have been, and I'm almost 100% sure that I've located it. And we actually went there. We met the current owner. He rents it out, and there were sheds there that, well, there were buildings that are clearly really old buildings that looked more like they would have been stables and that sort of thing. There was no building that was obviously a dwelling, but he told us that the original house had been built around and extended upwards and sideways, so it might have been the original building. But we also did South Percy Horner Farm, which is half a mile down the road, and met the owner there. And there's a cottage, an old shed there that is clearly an old Button Ben cottage, and it's currently being used as a farm shed. And I'm pretty sure that was Maggie's home. So that was really surreal experience. He was very kind and welcoming, and moved all the farm equipment out so that we could go inside and have a good look. And I was a little bit hesitant to contact these people, thinking, how would you feel if somebody from the other side of the world contacted you and said, hey, guess what, I think our ancestors murdered someone in your farm. But they couldn't have been more welcoming, which is great. But as for what happened to some of the people, well, as I mentioned, the brother moved to New Zealand. I would have loved to find out what happened to John Lovey's mother, but I couldn't ever find a death date for her. Full of other fun facts related to the family. Judy Garland was descended from one of them. There's a scene where they bleed a cow, and it's one of the Milne. One of Lovey's sisters had married a Milne, and he had descendants, and Judy Garland was one of them.
Right.
Yeah. So, and the other one was just a few days before my book launch, I'd been advertising the launch on my Facebook page, my public Facebook page, and I woke up one morning and there was a message there from a John Lovey. And I really freaked out. What is this? No, I don't believe in ghosts. It must be a scammer. And then I looked again, and it was somebody who had researched the story, knew the story, and had seen, he was doing family history research and had seen my ad for my book launch. And he was a descendant of one of the Lovey's cousins or something. So we met him, which was wonderful. He'd done a lot of extensive research. Yeah, so they're all spread far and wide. Yeah.
So when you finally had done all your research and gotten everything that you wanted, and then
Hmm.
began to write. How long did it take you to write the book?
Well, it's hard to say because I don't tend to do the research first and then do the writing. I do the basics, find the story, but the research is an ongoing process. So when I get to a point in the story that I need to know more about the setting, I'll do the research then. So, for example, when I got to the court scene, then I went into more depth, like as to how the court was laid out and what the legal practices were and that sort of thing. I think I find that more effective than doing all the research and then doing all the writing, because there's always more questions that arise when you're writing.
Yeah.
So I think the whole book took maybe 4 or 5 years, but not full time. I work
All
as
right.
well.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah.
All right. And and there's a something that you mentioned in your book that particularly was tickled me, and I was I was pleased to read about it. I live in Inverurie. Obviously, I'm not a native to Inverurie, but I live there. I live there now, and the reference to twice buried Mary, I just thought was great. She was a subject of one of my earlier podcasts. Where did you hear that story?
Yeah, it was. I read lots of folk tales and short stories set in Aberdeenshire, and I found that one in a book called Aberdeenshire Folk Tales by Grace Banks and Sheena Blackhall. Was published about 10 or 11 years ago.
Uh-huh.
And I was looking for something to build up a picture of just the mindset of the people and the atmosphere. And when I came across that story, I thought, oh, that's perfect, because there's that exhumation in it. And it provided a lovely parallel, a bit of foreshadowing with Maggie's story. So I was very keen to use that in the story.
Yeah, it is a good story, and I don't live very far from where she's buried, and I've gone out there and I found her tombstone, which is very weathered by now,
Wow.
but it's still.
Sure with it. Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's.
I wasn't sure whether it was a true story, a real person.
Oh, she was a real person, all right. Yes.
Wow.
Whether or not she was buried alive, that's maybe slightly exaggerated, but she was in fact a real person. I found her in the old parish records, so she did.
Wow.
Yeah, her real name is Marjorie, but yes.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. Wow. I mean, and also she helped to provide the title for the book.
Yeah, I did wonder that too. It's like it was similar. Yeah. Anyway, well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope I haven't waffled through these questions too badly. But it was.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It was great talking to you. The book 3 Times Buried by Jane Smith is available through Aberdeenshire Library Services. I highly recommend anyone listening to check it out from the library and give it a read. Please join me again next time. Bye for now.
This young man is taken and brought to the jail. In strong iron fetters remained for a while. His trial is now over, the verdict it's passed, and will leave him to heaven's just judgment at last.